Ladies and gentlemen, I'm excited to welcome the keynote speaker for the day, an award-winning entrepreneur, Khaled Sabawi. Khaled is the founder and president of Mina Geothermal and the Tabo Initiative. Am I saying that right? Okay. He received his degree in computer engineering from the University of Waterloo and later became the first certified geothermal engineer in the Middle East. Khaled was named one of the world's top energy entrepreneurs by Global Post in 2010 and was ranked the 196th most influential Arab by Arabian business magazines in their top 500 most influential Arabs. As president of Mina, Khaled received the National Energy Globe Award twice in 2008 and 2011 and has installed the largest geothermal system in the Middle East at the American University in Madaba, Jordan. Khaled is also the general manager of UCI, Mina's parent company and one of the largest real estate development companies in Palestine. He also founded the Tabo Initiative, which is the first project dedicated to expanding property rights in Palestine as a means of protecting Palestinian land while allowing Palestinians from all over the world the ability to own an affordable plot of land in Palestine. Without further ado, put your hands together for Khaled Sabawi.
When my parents named me Khaled and my name turned out to be Khaled Sabawi, little did they know that one day my name would match the name of a wanted Jordanian criminal. I discovered this when I arrived to Jordan for the very first time as an adult in 2005 on my way to the Palestinian territories. The Jordanian immigration official took my Canadian passport, entered my name into his very modern 1992 Pentium 1 computer, and said the most welcoming word that can be said in the Arabic language. Study, which in English translates into take a seat, but for experienced travelers to the Middle East, they know it means you're screwed. I was, of course, then detained, and Jordanian officials would spend the following hours trying to figure out if I was in fact this wanted Jordanian criminal, using what appeared to be a highly sophisticated technique of blowing Marlboro smoke rings and staring into Turkish coffee cups. After my short experience with the Jordanian government's intelligence agency, which I find to be a contradiction in terms, I understood why my parents immigrated to Canada. After experiencing the difficult experience of living as Palestinian refugees in the Arab world, my parents immigrated to Canada seeking a better life for their children. A life where their children could be treated as equals, regardless of their religion, ethnicity, or former citizenship. A life where the children could almost freeze to death while playing outside in minus 25 degrees weather. Thank you, Mama and Papa. I was extremely fortunate to grow up in Canada. Growing up in a largely middle-class society where lines of social stratification are relatively blurred, I was literally raised on the concept that the sky is the limit. This was very different from the society in which my parents grew up, where their Palestinian identity was their limit. Institutionalized discrimination by Arab governments legally prevented my parents from owning land or even owning a business in most of the Arab world. In order for them to start a business in a Gulf country, for example, they had to give 51% ownership of their business to some Khaliji dude whose biggest contribution to the business would be sitting in his office and hitting on the secretary while playing with his tishtasha. Growing up with the notion that you can achieve your goals, in my opinion, is a prerequisite to a successful career. Without it, I wouldn't be here addressing you today. Only in the land of equal and endless opportunity can the graduate of the University of Waterloo have the privilege of addressing the ever smarter students from the University of Toronto. We all know what a graduate from the University of Waterloo calls a graduate from the University of Toronto. Boss. In addition to growing up in an environment of equal opportunity, I wouldn't be who I am today or where I am today if it wasn't for my thrilling, edifying, and nearly dropout experience studying computer engineering at the University of Waterloo. There's a widespread notion that the University of Waterloo has one of Canada's best engineering programs. Thus, let me give you a little glimpse into what that experience was like. Coming from high school, I was a gentle student with a proud history of awards, honors, and test results with big smiley faces beside them. My accomplishments in high school actually pointed me towards a career in the liberal arts, but I was determined to do something useful, so I chose engineering. Just kidding, engineers are completely useless. Little did I know what I was getting myself into. For Waterloo's boot camp engineering program had about 40 hours of classes and tutorials per week. You know how they tell you that when you come into university, you expect your high school average to drop about 10%? Yeah, mine dropped 30. Fighting to stay awake through 8 hours of lectures every single day, I wondered to myself, am I the only one that doesn't understand what the professor is saying? Is he even speaking English? God, why do I keep drifting away and dreaming about the girls that are absent from this program? Take my algebra professor, for example. Putting his sentences together was like putting together the pieces of a puzzle in real time. He kept saying, no, after every single sentence he'd say. For example, the answer to the question is 55. No. The worst was his answers to yes or no questions. We'd be like, Professor, does x equal 5? Yes. No. Or take my Chinese chemistry professor, who pronounced oxygen and octane exactly the same. Octane and octane. I remember thinking to myself, what is the engineering department at the University of Waterloo thinking? Do they actually believe that math is a universal language? I mean, who needs colloquial English? Speech communication? Who needs that? So why were these professors still on campus? Their research was outstanding. My tuition dollars at work. Finally came exam time. The University of Waterloo engineering department thought to themselves, there are 5 days during the week, and there are 5 courses. Perfect. 1 exam for every day of the week. Exams at Waterloo were like those crazy math contests that you could take in high school just to get out of class, except now your tuition dollars were on the line. No pressure. Physics, one of the most complicated courses, was a 3-hour exam that consisted of only 12 multiple choice questions. Get 1 wrong, bye-bye 8.3%. And they took away the only one thing you could salvage to pass the course. No part marks. On that exam, I got a whooping 6 out of 12. And when the mark came back, the comment from the professor that came along with it said, what happened? I wish I knew. Our microprocessors course also was a multiple choice exam, except this time it had minus marks for circling the wrong answer. I nearly fainted when I discovered my mark in that exam was 47%. I nearly fainted again when I discovered the class average was 40%. God bless the bell curve. I ended up with an 85% in that course. Fortunately, Waterloo had an excellent co-op program. And I was afforded the excellent experience of alternating between 1 semester of school and 1 semester of work, which allowed me to be exposed to an enormous range of industries, including aviation, renewable energy, government research, and engineering design. My first co-op term, which was in first year, taught me one of my most important lessons, that if you work very hard as an engineer for 8 straight years at a company, you will have a cubicle the same size as the intern sitting beside you. Little did I know that my boot camp experience at the University of Waterloo would prepare me for much bigger battles that I was to take on during my life. Now, combine this experience with growing up as a Canadian Palestinian. In Canada, we were encouraged to celebrate our identity and express our free speech. Learning about the Palestinian cause was a very empowering experience, and participating in human rights activism on university. There was nothing like the feeling of empowerment for me after reading an article written by the late Palestinian-American scholar Edward Said. Being raised as a Palestinian meant that I was raised on the imperative that if we Palestinians who were lucky enough to grow up in one of the most progressive societies in the world and receive education in amongst the best institutions in the world, if we don't go back to Palestine to help out, who will? Thus, I wanted to go back to the Middle East and Palestine, and not just start a business or find a way to experience entrepreneurship, but to also contribute socially. If I was to go back there, I wanted to find a way that my businesses could give back to the community, but at the same time maintain financial independence and offer a product that met a market demand. Now, when I arrived to Palestine in the Middle East, I recognized a ton of problems. Those areas include an endless list of problems. But rather than sit there apathetically and hope for a miracle or depend on what many people do there, which is depend on foreign donor aid, I was determined to find ways to uniquely tackle those problems while at the same time maintaining a financially independent business. So during the last 6 years, I created 2 for-profit social enterprises, each focused on tackling a problem faced by Palestinians where I was living. The first one tackled the problem of energy efficiency and met the demand of clean, affordable energy through a company called Mina Geothermal. The second tackled the problem of the lack of property rights in Palestine and met the demand of affordable land through the Tabo initiative. So when I first arrived to the Middle East, I noticed an enormous problem in energy efficiency. It turned out that the energy intensity, which is energy consumption divided by GDP in the Middle East and North Africa, is 40% higher than the world average. While developed nations experienced a decline in energy intensity since 1980, the only region in the world in which energy consumption was growing at a rate faster than GDP was the Middle East and North Africa. That meant that we were consuming far more energy than we were producing. I thought to myself it was time to cut back on the falafel, which actually meant a decline in the production of natural gas. Hi-oh. When it comes to the energy used for transportation, it's even worse. It turns out the Middle East and North Africa is the most transport energy intensive region in the world. 13% more transport energy intensive than the US and Canada combined. 65% more transport energy intensive than the world average. And get this, 350% more transport energy intensive than China. And CNN thinks we still ride camels. We ride gas-guzzling Hummers for no reason at all. In the Palestinian territories, where things tend to happen in a more acute manner, we faced an even larger energy problem. In addition to having amongst one of the world's highest population growth rates, Palestinians were paying amongst the highest energy prices in the entire region. They had no sources of affordable energy, and they were highly dependent, unfortunately, upon the Israeli occupation for energy. With their high population growth rate, hundreds of thousands of new homes in Palestine were required to be built. Homes consume lots of energy for lighting, for appliances, but mainly for heating and for cooling. It was this extreme situation that drove us to think creatively and take our heads out of the ground and try to find alternative forms of energy to meet the demands of Palestinians, while at the same time trying to create a more sustainable economy for Palestine. So what did we do? We put our heads back down in the ground, 100 meters deep actually, and utilized a clean, renewable energy known as geothermal energy, which uses the stable temperatures in the earth to provide a clean, environmentally friendly heating and cooling. We installed many geothermal systems in Palestine that use the stable temperatures in the earth to provide an efficient source of heating and cooling. These systems eliminated the carbon dioxide emissions that would have been produced by the standard fuel-burning heating systems widely used in Palestine. And they saved 70% on energy consumption compared to the standard fuel-burning heating systems widely used there. Our vision for building right on a massive scale was finally realized when we were awarded the contract to install the largest geothermal system in the entire Middle East, which is 1.6 megawatts at the American University of Madaba in Jordan. Our geothermal systems are now saving a combined 300,000 kilowatt hours of electricity, 140,000 liters of diesel fuel, and 310 kilograms of carbon dioxide emissions every single year. In spite of this, I still have to prove I'm not a criminal every time I enter Jordan. This is the effort of a small Palestinian green energy business that faced an environment with enormous obstacles. We were trying to keep Palestine cool from the ground up. I guess it worked, since a representative from the Israeli Ministry of National Infrastructure sent us an email saying, quote, "I'm impressed. It looks like we have a lot to learn from you." Damn straight. Palestinian TV was also very excited when they referred to me as, quote, the inventor of geothermal. The Palestinian Authority did not email us, unfortunately, because they're still learning how to use email. There's so much potential for what can be done to improve energy efficiency in the region, except unfortunately the policies that exist there by Arab governments discourage investment in renewable energy because of the highly subsidized energy prices. When energy prices are dropped, there's no financial incentive for the end user to reduce their energy consumption. Right now, 7.1% of the entire region's GDP goes towards energy subsidies. Conserving electricity was even recognized by the late Muammar Gaddafi, who stated, were it not for electricity, we would have to watch television in the dark. Now, once MENA geothermal began running smoothly, I turned my attention to tackling another dire problem that Palestinians have faced throughout their history. Now, my father's Canadian passport literally states that his birthplace is Salama. Just one word. You might be asking yourselves, where on earth is a place called Salama? That is because it no longer exists. In fact, it hasn't existed for 65 years. Salama, like hundreds of beautiful Palestinian villages, was wiped off the map when the State of Israel was created. Not only was it wiped off the map, but it was also deliberately wiped from the records of history in Israel. This is why, when viewing my father's passport, Israeli border security believes that Salama is either a country in Europe, a moon orbiting Saturn, or that place in Lord of the Rings where Frodo comes from. Courtesy of the Israeli Ministry of Education, Israeli border security believes that Palestine might have existed somewhere in Middle Earth, or if lucky, Narnia. Luckily, for my generation of Palestinians, our education was grounded in reality, as we were taught that those who do not know history are doomed to repeat it. Now, after Israel occupied the West Bank, it was able to confiscate Palestinian land quite easily. Why? Because the majority of Palestinians didn't have title deeds to their lands. Unfortunately, 70% of the West Bank today has no title deed, and the Israeli occupation has taken full advantage of this. When Israel occupied the West Bank and Gaza in 1967, the first thing that it did was send surveyors to survey the entire lands of the West Bank to determine where areas had title deed and where areas didn't have title deed. Why? So they could plan for their settlement expansion. You see, back in the day, people didn't, under the Ottoman Empire, they didn't want to register their land because they didn't want to pay taxes and they wanted to stick it to the man. But unfortunately, Israel took full advantage of this. And until today, Israel uses an Ottoman law that states if your land has no title deed and is not put to use, then the state can appropriate the land and declare it as state land. With 70% of the West Bank having no title deed, Palestinian land is at enormous risk. Combine this reality with the fact that title deeds only exist inside the Palestinian cities. Thus, land within those cities has a value that is extremely skyrocketed. Land has become extremely expensive. Take, for example, the neighborhood called Masyun in Ramallah, where a dunam of land, which is a quarter of an acre, 1,000 square meters, is now valued at $1 million US. Or how about the village of Abu Qash, which is just on the outskirts of Ramallah? A dunam of land is now 200,000 US. Thus, unfortunately, land has become unaffordable for the majority of Palestinians. In their own country, Palestinians can't even afford to own land. Thus, we thought to ourselves, we need to find a way to create title deeds and thus expand property rights, while at the same time giving Palestinians inside and outside the ability to own affordable land in their own country, which is by definition protecting Palestinian land. We thought to ourselves, it's time to put Palestinian lands back into Palestinian hands. So we began the process of purchasing big plots of land outside Ramallah, about 9 to 25 kilometers from the city center. Now, this process required an enormous amount of due diligence. When you buy a piece of land from somebody that doesn't have a title deed, the documentation that they have is very limited. They'll have an inheritance document and a simple paper that says they own land in the specific area. Now, they're Palestinians, so their inheritance document included them and their 50 cousins who were living all over the world. And in order to make the sale legitimate, you had to get a power of attorney from every single inheritor, so the sale could be legal and legitimate. Now, in addition to this, you had to determine the borders of the land. So look at this beautiful picture in front of you. When you go to the actual owner of the land and you'd ask him, where are the borders of your land? He would literally say, it's from this olive tree to that olive tree to see that donkey walking over there. And that's literally how people know the borders of their land. So in order to create the first ever master plan for the land, we literally had to go out with a GPS machine, a land surveyor, the head of the village councillor, and every single neighbor, and draw the borders of the land and have every neighbor sign to confirm the borders of the land. This thus became the first ever master plan. And we focused to develop these lands in the Palestinian villages, which were being neglected by everybody, unfortunately, in the Palestinian territories. So going through this process, and this was the beginning of a process that took us about 2 to 3 years to create the actual title deed. Once you create this master plan, you then have to post it up for objection in the local newspapers and the local village mosque, and people are allowed to object, and you have to go through this very difficult bureaucracy. And to give you an example of what this bureaucracy was like, I'm, of course, being an engineer by education, as soon as I got there and I looked at this issue, I said, I need to see a flow chart of the process to create a title deed. And the first reaction was, what is a flow chart? But when we finally put a flow chart together, and this was the first time a flow chart like this has ever been put together in Palestine, when I presented it to one of the ministers there, he looked at me and said, where did you come from? And when I showed him the flow chart, and I'm going to show you, this is the bureaucracy one has to go through in Palestine to purchase a piece of land, create a title deed, and then divide it up into pieces to make it affordable for people. It looks like a board game where it's like, don't pass go, don't collect $200. So after going through this very difficult process, this took us about 2 to 3 years, and after a lot of sweat and tears, we were proud in 2011 to launch a project called Pablo, which is the Ottoman word used for title deed in Palestinian territories, which for the first time made available an affordable dunam of land, designated residential with full infrastructure service at a very affordable price. Not $1 million, not $200,000, but an average price of $20,000. This, Abu Qash, the area I showed you before, was simply a 10-minute drive from these areas, and that land was $200,000. So we made it about 10% of the nearing area with title deed. And that really made land affordable because we also offered it to Palestinians at a financed price for 2 years, so they didn't have to pay the full amount at day one. They were able to finance it with us at no interest for 2 years. So it made the land actually affordable. In addition to that, there's Palestinians that live outside of Palestine. In fact, there's 6 million Palestinians that live outside, and it's their right to own land too in the Palestinian territories. So we wanted them to have the ability to be able to make a comfortable decision to buy land in Palestine. So we created a website. And they can simply go online by going to www.tabo.ps, choose the land of their choice, see all the information about it, learn information about the village, choose the master plan, see it actually superimposed on the mountain, see an actual view as if they're standing on the master plan. And this is an actual 3D panorama where they can completely turn around and see it. See the information such as the slope, the elevation, and if they like it, they can add it to their shopping cart, see the price, accept the terms and conditions, and check out online. The idea of being able to offer affordable land to Palestinians to choose online was a completely new idea that people weren't really willing to accept in the beginning. But in just 2 years, we're proud to say that Tabo has allowed hundreds of Palestinian families to own affordable land for the very first time in Palestine. Of course, the Palestinian Authority and their private sector elites were not happy to see a young, outspoken Palestinian entrepreneur create a new project and not ask for their help, as people are accustomed to in that part of the world. And I caution you, please don't take my story as a romanticization of working in the Middle East. The Middle East is a very difficult place with enormous amounts of obstacles. It can be a very dark place, unfortunately. I was fought left and right, in my experience, by the Israelis, by the Palestinian Authority, and even by the Jordanian government. I can't tell you how many times a cynical old Arab government official would look at me and say, "Shoo, fakir halak fi Canada?" In spite of the obstacles I faced under Israeli military occupation and the Palestinian Authority security occupation, we continue to find solutions and work towards creating a more sustainable, independent economy for Palestine. We dare to establish that the power of an idea, combined with creative entrepreneurship, is far greater than any obstacle that lies in its way. Whether you choose to work in Canada or travel abroad to work, if in Palestine, in the face of such extraordinary challenges, we were able to find unique solutions to tackle very difficult problems, I think it can be done anywhere in the world. Thank you very much.